The voice of sharing, Durian ASEAN.
ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hello and welcome to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. You're with Gowri.
And this is Grace.
And this is a Friday, which means it's anything can happen Friday.
I'm so happy today's finally Friday.
It does sound happy, but your eyes look really, really red.
Yes, because I had a really long day and a long night yesterday. I'm so sorry. But yes, I can't wait to, just get over with all this and wait for the weekend.
Yay! And of course, next week is Christmas, and then it's New Year, and it's pretty exciting times, don't you think?
Of course, December is always a very happening season.
Very Christmassy, very celebratory, and the Christmas trees are up everywhere with decorations.
Especially songs are everywhere too.
Cannot help feeling that holiday mood coming on.
Yes.
And of course, there's also a lot of things that's happening in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, all over the region, and we are here to enlighten our listeners about what's going on around here.
Yes, what's going on? Then we are literally flooded with the news today.
I saw what you did there.
Ah, thank you.
So there's yes, we are flooded with news, and we also have a massive flood that happened in Kelantan actually about 2 days ago, and over 2,000 people were evacuated, and they actually have to resort to staying in schools now. And if you were to look at some of the images, the whole house actually gets engulfed by the water up until the roof.
Oh my goodness. And then a lot of people were really scared because it really happens in the certain states in Malaysia. And then this flood, and a lot of people had to evacuate in this region.
Usually, when it comes to end of the year, it's something that we always anticipate for a massive flood to happen around the coastal area, especially on the eastern coastal area like Kelantan, Terengganu, and all. And so it seems that 2,000 people were affected in the floods, and they have already been evacuated, and sadly most of them could not save much of their belongings except for their lives and maybe some very important documents, and nothing much that they could take with them because it all happened so fast even.
Yes, and also at the same time, Malaysia is not well known for all those natural disaster, and when it comes to situation like this, honestly, the government and the nation is not ready to face all this happens naturally.
It's interesting that you brought that up, that we are not ready, because like I just mentioned, it has happened multiple times, and by now we should be ready to face something like this. We should already know what to do, or something probably should have already been done about the drainage system or whatever it is that's the issue in Kelantan. But instead, we kind of keep focusing on just evacuation every year, and hopefully for next year, the people will be more proactive, the government will probably be more proactive and try to do something about it before the flood actually happens.
Yeah, and at the same time, well, since this happened, the state government needs to help out for those who actually had to evacuate really quickly, and because they might have just taken things that it's not even necessary. They might have just taken things that whatever they saw at that place, so they need to probably finance them and also provide something for them to be able to carry on with their lives.
And another news that also shook the nation is actually more of a gender issue, and it's not so much on natural disaster. And of course, there was this whole thing about men should be at work and women should be at home, and that is apparently the recipe for a high-income nation. Grace, where do you stand on this?
And then apparently at the same time, this research was compared to Japan, because Japan is very well known for males to be very dominated in the society, where females are just being housewives and staying at home, taking care of their children, and then doing house chores. So they compare with the Japan and then how successful the Japan is. But it's also very interesting that Japan is also looking forward to train more female workers and then to be able to develop the women entrepreneur in the nation. So I don't know where this research is going on, but then by comparing with all these developed nations, it's got to have a lot of controversy opinions in this.
And according to Dr. Noor Farah Nadia Wajib, actually she said Japan is listed as an example of a successful nation with low involvement of women in the workforce, like you were just mentioning earlier, and they are trying to use this as a model to adopt it in Malaysia. But however, in September, our Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is actually urging more women to join the East Asian countries' male-dominated workforce. And he said, we actually just need the right person for the job, and it doesn't matter if it's the male counterpart or the female counterpart. Both can be equally skilled and educated.
Yeah. By the way, Gowri is the Japan PM Shinzo Abe again. Not
Yay,
Abe.
Shinzo Abe. Okay.
And then one of the analyses that happened to find about the Malaysians is around 150,000 Malaysians married too early at age below 19. And then comprise their ability to get an education and be part of the productive labor force in a high-income nation, and instead relegated themselves to a life of dependency and underemployment.
It's very interesting that you brought that up, because just recently we also had a case of
Very young
child marriage.
couple.
Yes, the girl was 17 and the boy was only 15, and they got married, which is really strange in a way, because it's child marriages are supposedly frowned upon in the Malaysian society, and even contradicts with being a Muslim itself. And although it's in this case they did have the consent of the Sharia court and the permission of the parents, it's still something that if you look at it, they are so young that they are not ready to actually do this, to get married, to start a family, and that boy is only 15. How is he going to sustain themselves? What is he going to do?
Probably they are still depending on their parents. I mean, both sides. But then when you look at these issues further, actually in this nation, Malaysia, women entrepreneurs have put on so much effort, and then they are also one of the factors that actually help to increase the economic growth in the nation. And when this news came about, and like a lot of people were actually commenting on this news, because they were this one was entirely against the women to go out at work and then to expose themselves to the society, whereas most of the women, they felt quite offended, because we also have a right to go out and work and to be able to acknowledge what we are good at, what we can do. But then this is totally what we it sort of restrict a woman in the society.
And it's 2014, and we have come such a long way. Things like this should not even come up in the first place. We have evolved so far, and especially in terms of gender equality, we know that both men and women are capable of producing the same results, and they can be competitive against each other, and we should not even be dealing with news like this in the first place.
Well, when it comes to high-income nation, there are so many other factors. So this will be the very minor, teeny tiny factor, but they cannot affect so much on the high income or economic growth.
And moving on to something a little bit sensitive in the country, of course, we are talking about what happened with BFM recently. They actually have been fined, of course, for interviewing, and now it seems that they are also going to be charged under the Sedition Act.
So we don't know how this charge on the Sedition Act will be executed. However, this particular radio station did deal with quite sensitive issues regarding the Islam, and then Malaysia is very, very sensitive, and it becomes very controversial when it comes to certain religions. And there are a few DJs from BFM, and then they were dealing with all these topics regarding religion.
But in any country at all. We were just talking about becoming a high income nation, becoming a developed nation. Of course, we have our Vision 2020 as well. And one of the important aspects when it comes to heading in that direction is, of course, to advocate the freedom of speech. And you have to give your people the right to just to discuss about the things that they feel is important. And even in this case, yes, they interviewed the scholar Reza Aslan on certain sensitive issues like the use of the word Allah and certain other issues like wearing a tudong or not. And all these things should be up for discussion. It's up to the individuals themselves what they believe in, what they want to practice, and to have a dialogue about this. There's really nothing that sensitive.
Well, I can agree with you, Gowri, in this because media is a platform for anyone to come up and then express their opinions and thoughts and regarding any issues around the world or in nation. And the BFM indeed dealt with all those issues, discussing Islam, and it was already under charged under Sedition Act, and this is something that which is very controversial, and all the social media was really hot with this news regarding BFM, because BFM is well known for dealing with the quite serious matters.
Yes, and our constitution actually promises us the freedom of expressions, the freedom of speech, and everyone is entitled. They have the freedom to talk about the things that they matter. At the end of the day, this is our country, and if there's something that we think is important and needs to be discussed, and we need to get an expert's opinion on this, we should be able to go ahead and do so. But in this case, it seems that the Department of Islamic Development said that BFM actually failed to obtain approval from them to air their content, which is the major offense in this case. And also in terms of licensing, that all religious programming, especially on Islam, must actually be approved by relevant religious authorities before being transmitted on air. And of course, by having all these procedures and unnecessary red tapes, it only complicates matters further.
That's true.
And it seems BFM also undertook the necessary procedures to abide by the code, and they did not actually broadcast a full version of the interview in order to comply with the rule. But even then, it was still considered that they breached the law that was set by MCMC.
Yep, and this is a very interesting news because, it did affect the BFM station, but then it also brings a lot of pressure and also a lot of caution to the other radio station right now. And then we need to find a fine line where we can, release our news or a commentary, or even having a dialogue session with our guests. But then there are issues going around, and we have our right to express our opinions and to be able to educate our listeners at the same time. So we would love to follow up with this news in the future, and hopefully we can send some positive news regarding this.
And actually, just to add on a little bit, like you were mentioning, that these news are actually up there and they are being talked about. So whether the interview was conducted or not, people are still talking about it. People are still discussing about it. The only difference was whether or not was it on air or off air. So there's really not much of a difference, because as Malaysians, when we are concerned about a certain issue, we want to be able to talk about it, and we don't want to be bogged down by the fear of the Sedition Act or of breaking the law or going against what's been said by the authorities. And it can get really tricky, it seems. And so just to hopefully this issue gets resolved, and all the best to the DJs, and actually,
and especially to BFM.
Another good thing is a lot of Malaysians have actually come together and spoken out against this, and some of them even wanted to start collecting money for BFM. I even saw a Facebook group on that.
So it's very supportive of all those Malaysians.
It's nice to see everyone being supportive of each other. And on that positive note, we also have another effort that just kicked off yesterday.
Yep.
And it's of course in line with the Kami juga
Yep.
the 25. And it seems that
I really wish that was part of it. I mean, I am not a Malaysian, but I do support it because it's just another group of Malaysians coming up with open letter in support of reasonable and rational and informed dialogue, and it's definitely to voice out their opinions.
And this is, like you mentioned, another good example of Malaysians coming together and voicing out. Of course, there has been some critics as well against this on Facebook, and they're not sure where this is going to go exactly, how effective is this going to be. But I always believe that the most important part is to take the first step. You can complain, you can be critical, you can be doubtful, but at the end of the day, you're not doing anything about it, and you're just gonna keep complaining about the country. That doesn't make much of a difference either. So when somebody actually takes the effort to come up with something like, okay, we're done with this, we don't want to stay silent about issues that matter. We want to speak up. We want to get people together. So there's really no harm in joining them.
Well, it could be a very small movement among this community. However, if people heard about this news and then to be able to join this movement, definitely the message will be addressed to Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Razak. And then also the group really urged and emphasized that to deliver a country that promotes inclusiveness and celebrates the unity of its people through diversity, because indeed Malaysia is very well known for having its colorful diversity of cultures with different races. And they also believe that it is not only Malay Muslims who have a voice and also stake in this country. It is every Malaysian who believes in the common vision and shared destinies, the ideals which are no different to when Malaya became independent and Malaysia was born after that.
And according to the co-creator Azrul, of course, he said, for too long we have actually tolerated this. We have allowed the voices of arrogance, bigotry, ignorance, and prejudice to speak for all of us. No more. And the message is clear and simple. We will not tolerate this. This is our country, and we want to we want to be a part of it. We are already a part of it, and we want to get rid of all these barriers that's separating us, all this prejudice, and we want to just come together as one nation, as Malaysians.
And the timing here is very, very interesting, Gowri, because it's December, it's the last month of 2014, and then they just made a movement in this month. So they're expecting something, and we can also expect something, a change or a small, very teeny tiny change in next year.
And yes, it is in line with the resolution, and we are all hoping for a better Malaysia, of course. And let's move on to our neighbor, Indonesia. And Jokowi has been creating headlines again with his controversial moves. And it seems that this time he is actually trying to slice the privileged mindset. And we talked about the ruling elite before, and how every country has their ruling elite, and that can complicate things because they have their certain privileges that we just cannot diffuse through. But in this case, Jokowi is actually trying to do away with that, and he said that during official meetings or political galas, they are only going to have street food like cassava, steamed corn, and yam cakes. And he's also going to actually slash all their 2015 travel budgets.
And at the same time, he actually announced his 3 key points of his presidency. One is curbing the access of the country's political elite, cutting budget to make rooms for social programs and infrastructure development, and highlighting his humble roots to rebuild trust in the government. So those are the quite important factors to look at and to taken into consideration. And Joko Widodo, indeed, he highlighted those key factors.
And it seems that he is really going for a very thorough reform. But what do you think when it comes to ministers or even the prime minister? Should they actually have that certain privilege, or do you agree with what Jokowi is doing, that they should cut down on the spending, just eat normal street food, just travel economy? You don't need that privileged first class all the time.
It's more about how all those politicians or high authority people or even the elite, they need to consider about just the ordinary lifestyle that the citizens are carrying on, and then to be able to understand their level of living, you should also be able to experience it. Then only you can understand better, and it's, I guess, you are sort of humbling yourself down to have the same level with this all the citizens in Indonesia.
And
'Cause-
that's what made Jokowi popular in the first place. The fact that he actually got down to the grassroots level and he mingled with the people. He didn't just say it from the top, like, okay, you guys vote for me. He actually went down. He got involved with what they were doing, helping them out, and he probably didn't even have to ask for them for their votes anymore, because people just saw what a people-centered person he is.
And then Indonesia is also another country is very well known for diversity and also inequality and corruption. So this could be the one of the movement that Jokowi wants to make a step forward, because to have the anti-corruption movement in the country, he has to do something about it. So this is one of his humble gesture towards this to show his respect towards the citizen in Indonesia.
And it seems he's also very insistent on breaking Indonesia's thousand friends, zero enemies approach. And he sees no point in making friends with everybody, being nice with everybody. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really benefit Indonesia in ways that it should. So he's actually, of course, started sinking foreign ships. We reported about that. And then he's also trying to bring back all the migrant workers who are not being treated well, who are outside of Indonesia. And all this is actually causing a lot of controversy in the country itself. But it seems he is setting a certain reputation for himself that he wants to be known for, and it seems we can now expect a politician from a public that really knows that this can actually exist.
And in fact, that in his working history, he did make people-centric policies the center point of his aggressively anti-corrupt and humble political career. And at the same time, he actually proved his ability to transform the crime-ridden city into a culture and a tourist center, revamping infrastructure and developing programs for slum dwellers. So these are the movements that he already did achieve before, and then now he's a prominent figure in the nation, and again he wants to do something about it, to be able to maintain his connection and also his humbleness towards people.
And of course, for every positive, there's also a negative.
Of
And
course.
in this case, it seems that by Jokowi becoming very people-oriented, by focusing a lot in his country, people are starting to wonder, is Jokowi actually turning away from ASEAN? Because he's just he's more on working on bilateral relationships between nations, and not so much about the foreign policy centering all over ASEAN anymore.
Well, they used to say ASEAN is the cornerstone of the Indonesian's foreign policy,
Mm-hmm.
but it looks like they're changing it into a cornerstone of our foreign policy. Foreign policy advisor Rizal Sukma to Jokowi, he said that it's something that
But it
Yes.
seems that this happened actually barely 2 months after Indonesian president took office in the very historic elections. His foreign policy now is, of course, focusing more on, like I mentioned earlier, developing bilateral ties.
Yep.
And he's trying to include countries even beyond the Asia Pacific, and that is directed. And it seems that the way he sees it, that will benefit the Indonesian people even more. And he is going to focus on forging relationships with regions other than Asia Pacific. And his new version of Indonesia is more of Indonesia being like a global maritime fulcrum in the region, whether it's the Pacific region or the Indian Ocean region, or also known as the Pasindo. And he hasn't really focused that much on ASEAN per se. It's a wider focus in that sense.
Well, what I wanted to mention before was during ASEAN Economic Community that was held, the discussion was held. Joko Widodo actually he was being honest and very blunt to express his opinions that Indonesia must ensure that no harm comes to our national interests. So there was very firm and strong opinion coming from the president.
And it seems that Jokowi's focus on national interest also fed into a very growing sort of protectionist kind of approach to the country. And Indonesia, which actually accounts for about half of ASEAN's population, and it actually contributes 40% of its economic output, may actually prevent Jakarta from being fully on board with the AEC, with going for a single market, single bloc. And even according to Farish Eno, who is a Malaysian political scientist, he said that such populist moves may boost Jokowi's reputation at home, but it does risk damaging ASEAN's solidarity, because ASEAN integration is around the corner. It's gonna be 2015 in like about
just few weeks.
just less than 2 weeks. And of course we are trying to get every country on board, but Farish Eno is not feeling too good about it, and he is actually an expert when it comes to Indonesian matters. And he said that these moves by Indonesia have actually gone against the spirit of integration, of association itself, and could not end very well for our region.
But definitely there are some disagreement that's been happening between Jokowi and his team, and along with the changes in the international environment, and that also may ensure that what Jokowi wants now may not be what he gets.
And it may also be proven wrong that that Indonesia is actually being less involved in ASEAN matters. So that's all the time that we have for this morning. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And then we have our TuneIn app, so download the app and find us at Drian ASEAN.
And of course, feel free to give us any feedback about the news or about any issues that you want us to highlight. And we'll be back in a very short bit for our Blast from the Grassroots session on Friday. And this is Gowri.
And this is Grace.
We'll see you in a bit.